Hello, brothers and sisters. I want to say welcome. We're going to do a study called The Fall of Man. However, I want to start this off by giving an introduction, if you will. To understand Genesis chapter 3, starting at verse 1, it is very imperative or very important that we understand some things about Genesis chapter 2. I'm really not going to get into a deep study of Genesis chapter 2. However, I do want to bring some things to light. The first thing that I want us to understand as we look at Genesis chapter 3, starting at verse 1, I want us to look at the word now. If we notice in the King James Version, which is the book that I'm reading out of, I'll show it to the camera. This is the King James Version. If we look at it, the word now is capitalized. It is capitalized NOW. I believe that the capitalization is for us to understand that the word now comes in play after Genesis chapter 2, verses 3. If we look carefully, we will see that in Genesis chapter 2, starting at verse 1, it reads, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made." Verse 3 reads, "And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." The word now actually comes in play because during the time of God's rest, the serpent began to attack the man and the woman. Notice after the rest, if you read chapter 2 verse 3 again, it reads, "And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." The day is now sanctified. However, the word now comes in play. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, have God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. He asks this particular question on the day that God rested. Okay? On the day that God rested. Now, what about Genesis chapter 2, verses 4 through 25? If we look at it very closely, we will then begin to see that verse 4 says of chapter 2, "These are the generations of heaven and earth." Excuse me, these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. If we look at that very carefully, we will then begin to see that a commentary is beginning to take place, where that God is beginning to explain the creation of Adam and Eve. Notice if we go to uh, Genesis chapter 1, and if we look at verse 26, verse 26, and God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the flowers of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over everything that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created them. Notice that. But if we go to Genesis chapter 2, we will then begin to we'll then begin to see that God explains how man was created. We will see that in chapter 2, verse 7, it reads, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." It also explains how the woman came into being. Verse 21 of chapter 2, "And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God has taken he from man made he a woman and brought her unto man. We see that in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, it begins to explain certain things, okay? It begins to explain in great detail. So, what is happening is that God is using Genesis chapter 2 as a commentary on Genesis chapter 1, dealing with what? The Garden of Eden, dealing with the creation of Adam and Eve, dealing with the creation of the animals, dealing with the rivers, dealing with the place of the garden. Notice, if you have the 1611 King James edition, there is a part that is in there that is called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha, okay, which is no longer in the traditional King James Bible. But if we read the Apocrypha, and if we look at the wisdom of Solomon, and if we look at chapter 2, verse 23, it reads, "For God created man to be immortal, and made him to be an image of his own eternity." It tells us the reason why that the human being was created. The human being was created to live forever and to be a replica of God. If we notice that the word, uh, if we look at the word image, okay, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image, after his own likeness. The image is the replica. And what is God? God is forever. God is forever. And man is supposed to be forever. That's why that I want us to look at uh Genesis chapter 3, starting at verse 1. Now we clearly found out, okay, that the word now comes in play after Genesis chapter 2, verses 1, 2, and 3. Verse 1, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, complete," okay, and which is defined as also all the hosts of them. God is saying that every single thing is done, complete, finished. Verse 2 says, "And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made." God has now rested, okay? And on this rest, he then uh, tells us in verse 3 that he anointed this day of rest. Okay? He anointed this day of rest, which is called the Sabbath. Okay? Verse 3 says, "And God blessed the Sabbath, and God blessed the seventh day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." He then tells us why he have done this. Not only did he tell us why, also, okay, also he he gives it a name, the Sabbath, okay? It is the Sabbath, and God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, okay? Because the word "because" is for this reason, that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. God created and made. So I want us to look at Genesis chapter 3, starting at verse 1. "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, have God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden." Until next time, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 3, starting at verse 1.